All right, so this is AP Psychology, the Motivation Review, Chapter 11, Unit 12. We've already taken 12 tests. So this test will be on Monday, February 18th. There'll be 25 multiple choice, 1 FRQ. The FRQ has 5 different points on it. For all of you listening, it's a tough one. Make sure you are ready for your FRQ. Know your definitions. Know your definitions and be able to apply them. The FRQs are difficult this time. So let's start with motivation. Motivation is meeting our physiological and psychological needs and wants through behaviors, often unconscious of our reason. Meeting physiological and psychological needs and wants through behaviors often unconscious of our reason. As we talked, there's a lot of things that are motivation for us, both external and internal, whether they're physiological needs or their psychological wants. Those are all part of motivating behaviors. There's a lot of theories in this chapter, like most chapters. The first theory I want to talk about real quick is instinct theory. We didn't talk a lot about this, but we know that instinct is pre-programmed tendencies in humans and animals. Pre-programmed tendencies in humans and animals. This is when we talked about in class dogs shaking the water off their bodies, or birds flying south, or babies rooting, whatever it might be. The drive reduction theory. This is a motivation to satisfy our basic needs and return the body to homeostasis. A motivation to satisfy basic needs and return our body to homeostasis, this level of regulation, body temperature, blood pressure, respiration. Tension decreases when our needs are met. So the drive reduction theory says that when tension decreases when our needs are met. So you will satisfy those basic needs to drink water, to eat, to find shelter, to cool down, to return your body to homeostasis. And the tension will decrease when those needs are met, because it has to. Otherwise, we have a stroke, we get stressed out, we're exhausted, we die at the very extreme. Primary and secondary drives. Primary drives are things like food, water, the basic needs that we have. Secondary drives are things like money and esteem. These are the learned drives that come after the basic needs, the physiological needs. When those primary needs are satisfied, the secondary drives come after. So secondary drives are learned drives after physiological needs are satisfied. First, the drive reduction theory, at least, says that you will meet those primary needs before you seek secondary drives. Homeostasis is that balanced internal state that the drive reduction theory says we must return to for the maintenance of our physiology, the physiology of our body, and the psychology of our body. So the balanced internal state. Incentive versus drive. Let's first talk about incentive. Incentive is stimuli, like external stimuli, which motivates behavior, versus behavior which is motivated by physiological needs. So incentive is something, we showed it on that slide, dangling the carrot and the stick. External stimuli, which motivates behavior. You're going to want to reach for the carrot. You're going to want to go after it. Versus the drive, which is behavior that's motivated by more simple, basic physiological needs. Behavior is motivated by physiological needs. So know the difference between drive and incentive. There is a big difference, and I think once you just stop and think about it, you definitely realize that. But those two words seem like they're almost interchangeable. In psychology, we know they're not. But I think as long as you stop and take a second to think about that, you realize that an incentive is very different than a drive. An incentive is external. A drive is more internal. The optimal arousal theory says that motivation may increase or decrease arousal. We might call that interest or tension. So the optimal arousal theory says that motivation may increase or decrease arousal. So we're looking for the optimum level. We don't want too little because then we're bored and it gets old and we don't care. We don't want too much because then it's overwhelming and full of anxiety and unable to focus. So we want the optimal level, and the optimal arousal theory says that motivation is going to get us to this optimal level, or it's actually going to bring us down from that. But the perfect level is right in the middle, and that's when we have the best performance. When we talk about the optimal arousal level, this is what the Yerkes-Dodson law is based on. The Yerkes-Dodson law says that performance increases to a point and then it decreases. So if you see that chart, and if you can remember that chart that I put up, you have a bell curve, essentially. And arousal is on the x-axis, and performance is on the y-axis. And you want just the optimum amount of arousal to perform well. And if you have not enough, your performance is not going to be good. And if you have too much, your performance is not going to be good either. Maslow's theory. Maslow was a humanist. Remember, this is when we're always trying to achieve our full potential. He said that needs must be met before advancing to higher level needs. So Maslow is a humanist who said that in order to achieve full potential, our needs must be met before advancing to higher level needs. So at the bottom of the pyramid, those needs have to be met. You can't just skip levels and go to, say, esteem or self-actualization. So make sure you know that hierarchy. I know for a fact I don't know for a fact, but I know there's 3 or 4 questions. The AP board loves to ask you about hierarchy questions. I will tell you right now, on my test on Monday, I tell you the level. I say physiological or esteem or belongingness. Don't be surprised if you get to the AP exam in 53 days and it says level 1, level 2, level 3. Now you know that level 1 is a physiological need. You know that level 5 is a self-actualization. Make sure you remember those and don't confuse them, because the AP board won't necessarily give you those terms. I will on Monday give you the terminology. You just need to remember what's what. Think about that handout. You know, there was a lot of controversy. Where is heat, for example? Where is money or a car? The examples that I put on the test are pretty clear-cut. I've tried to be really, really specific on those. Okay, our motivation for hunger. We put up on the board, there's a lot of factors that influence hunger way more than actual hunger and appetite itself. This is very much a physiological and a psychological need. Walter Cannon. So Washburn and Cannon did an experiment in which he swallowed a balloon to measure stomach contractions. So Washburn and Cannon carried out this experiment in which Washburn swallowed a balloon to measure stomach contractions. What Cannon's hypothesis was that the stomach contractions signaled the brain to tell the brain that you were hungry and that you need to eat. What Washburn realized and Cannon found out that his hypothesis was wrong. This theory needed to be changed because for many, many years, this is what we thought, that the motivation for hunger was a signal to the brain. This theory, this experiment started a whole new series of understanding of motivation for hunger. And now we realize that hunger comes much more from the brain. So let's go down to the brain. Hunger is physiological and psychological. But we realize the brain has a bigger effect on hunger than the stomach. It's physiological and psychological. The brain has a bigger effect on hunger than the stomach. One of the probably largest parts of the brain involved in eating is the hypothalamus. There's several different parts of the brain, but probably the largest effect on hunger is the hypothalamus. On eating, I should say, is the hypothalamus. By the way, we talked about the ventromedial and the lateral hypothalamus. Know that the hypothalamus is broken up into, I think, 8 different parts, actually. If you know anatomy pretty well, you understand that if there's a lateral, there has to be an opposite side to it. So for our purposes, all you need to know, unless you're going into neurobiology, is that the ventromedial hypothalamus controls our eating. So the VMH, if you see that right there, controls eating. That's the part of the brain in the hypothalamus that tells us, stop, we're good, you're satisfied, stop eating. The lateral hypothalamus, or the LH, stimulates hunger, stimulates eating. That says, hey, keep eating, let's go, I'm still hungry. If you can remember the acronym, or the little mnemonic device, I should say, LAT makes you fat. Remember, lateral triggers eating. Set point theory is that we have an individual weight thermostat, if you will, of our natural weight. And that works with our metabolism, and each of us have an individual weight thermostat. And that you shouldn't really fluctuate very far from it. You can reset your set point. That takes time, that takes a lifestyle change. Big fluctuations one way or another cannot be maintained because that's just not the body's natural metabolism. Eating disorders, I want you to know anorexia, bulimia, and obesity. I want you to know that all 3 of those are considered eating disorders. Especially I want you to know about anorexia. The situation with anorexia, and if you remember the video, there's a fear of becoming obese. It's often young women, typically white, not overweight. In fact, they look thin to most people. To them, they don't. So anorexia is a fear of becoming obese and having a distorted body image. It's especially in young women, and usually it's over an aspect of control. Anorexia has very little to do with food, actually, and much more to do with having some sort of control in their life. Something else is probably going on, and they need to have a sense of control. Oftentimes they're perfectionists. They are highly intelligent. They understand at least some part of their own psychological effects without even consciously being aware of what they're doing to their body. A BMI is, according to the National Board of Health, over 30 is obese. Under 18 of a BMI is underweight. Now remember, both of those are based on height and weight, and it's just a number. You know, we talked, there can be people who's considered obese and they're not obese, but it is a number and it's a starting point, and you have to be mindful of at least that. But remember, you're going to have your own set point. It can be changed, but it's a good indicator of your own physiological health. I see I have on here motivation for sex, and I don't have anything under Masters and Johnson, so just cross that one out. We know that they started the research on the motivation for sex, looking at couples in a controlled setting, which really led us more to other information that we needed. I don't know if we needed that information, but it's helped us understand other things like homosexual studies. Identical twins have a higher correlation of homosexuality than fraternal twins. And you know, for those of you who were in class today, that statistic should have shocked you. You know, that's a strong number. Identical twins, monozygotic twins, have a higher correlation of homosexuality than fraternal or dizygotic twins. So that has to tell us that it is genetically determined. Of course, correlation does not mean causation. But when you have high correlation, positive or negative, then you can start to see these genetic links. And in homosexual studies, that's what we can see. Industrial organizational psychology. This is workplace psychology. This is Toby. What we might refer to as human resources. Human resources in really good companies are psychologists. In companies that maybe can't afford a psychologist, they're more business-minded. And business-minded individuals maybe don't always have the right background in psychology. So what industrial organizational psychologists want is for people, the employees, to feel motivated. When they feel respected, when they feel valuable, when they feel equal. We talked about all those things like communication and enculturation and leadership. So in the workplace psychology, people feel motivated when they feel respected, valuable, and equal. Then we also talk about a locus of control. When we talk about a locus of control, and we're talking about the locus of control in your environment, think back to the last chapter of reciprocal determinism. You know, like your environment is very much affected by your thoughts and your behavior. Of course, your behavior and your thoughts are very much affected by your environment, and vice versa. When we talk about a locus of control, we talk about an internal locus. If you have a strong internal locus of control, you feel like things are within your control. They're not so big that you can't handle them. You're not fooling yourself. You know that this is going to be a challenge. You know that you can do it. But a strong internal locus of control, you have this sense of being able to control your environment. An external locus of control is when you feel like you have very little influence or control over the things that are happening in your environment. They're so big, they're so challenging that there's really no point for you to even try. I don't know if I shared with all the classes, but I said in one class, at least I know, for me that's things like childhood hunger. You know, childhood hunger for me seems beyond my internal locus of control. For me, that's more than I can tackle. There's some things I can do to help hunger. I don't know how to handle the situation of childhood hunger in America. So that is it. If you have any questions, give me a holler over the weekend on email. Otherwise, be ready. See you on Monday.